Hi everyone, my essay was on whether protest is a meaningful form of dissent in today's modern society. I was looking at Herbert Marcuse, Thomas Franks and Hannah Arendt's theories on protest and dissent and using them to analyse the Hobbit protests. So the Hobbit protests began because the New Zealand Actors' Equity Union wanted to provide a standard contract with minimum criteria in place for contract workers, which could then be individually negotiated between the workers and their employers. This was because employees, as opposed to contract workers, had more protection under the law. This dispute very quickly escalated and resulted in October 2010 with Warner Brothers, New Line and MGM threatening to move filming of The Hobbit somewhere else. The dispute between the studio bosses and the union was resolved on October the 14th. Peter Jackson and the government were informed, however, rallies around New Zealand with thousands of Kiwis marching in protest against the union and the actors and trying to promote New Zealand as a location for The Hobbit were organised from the 20th of October. The following week, representatives arrived from Warner Brothers and met with John Key, and the outcome is an amendment to the Employment Act known as the Hobbit Law, reclassifying all film industry workers as contract workers and increased subsidies paid by the government to the film studios. So my three chosen theorists all have their particular slant on dissent and protest in the modern world, and in each case I agree with what they are saying. However, I don't feel that any one of them have a complete understanding of protest and how it works and whether it is effective, but combined their theories do offer a really comprehensive analysis. So from Herbert Marcuse, in relation to the Hobbit protests, I can see the rational irrationality of the marketplace. The protest started because unions were trying to protect workers' rights. The protesters who were protesting against the unions were also claiming to protect those same workers' rights by protecting their jobs. Marcuse also talks about how the rationale of the marketplace becomes so indoctrinated within our thinking that to dissent seems completely irrational. Any challenge to the status quo is seen as destabilising the whole, and so the Hobbit protest can be seen as becoming something that threatened much more than just the actors and could affect a huge percentage of New Zealanders and their livelihoods. And in that context, the loss of rights for a minority of workers to ensure that stability of a much larger community is considered rational. Marcuse also highlights how an administered society inhibits our ability to critically think. There was definitely a PR campaign that continued after the union dispute had been settled, with statements by Peter Jackson using emotive language and linking the union movement to Australia and bullying, implying that Australia was taking over New Zealand. These statements were designed to resonate with New Zealanders to encourage them to act against the unions in order to keep the Hobbit here. From Thomas Franks is the idea of the mutability of capitalism, how capitalism has really taken that idea of protest and rebellion against conformity and really owned it by appealing to consumers and marketing brands as new, innovative and rebellious. For me, this quote from Franks really resonated. Rebellion makes no sense without repression. We must remain forever convinced of capitalism's fundamental hostility to pleasure in order to consume capitalism's rebel products. So we would normally see protest as a minority acting against the establishment. In the Hobbit protests, we see capitalism in the form of the film studios as the protesters, and the union is cast in the role of the establishment and the repressor. So this allows the studios to be seen to be promoting freedom, change and progress. Franks shows us that this is the mutability of capitalism, that it can easily be the rebel or the repressor or both, and it is not inconsistent with any of capitalism's ideals. Hannah Arendt looks at dissent in a very different way from Marcuse and Franks. While they were quite revolutionary in their definitions of protest, Arendt sees dissent as something that happens within the status quo, that develops change from within, not necessarily huge change, but small and constant change. Dissent encourages public debate, strengthens democracy and prevents revolution. And the Hobbit protests, the very act of protesting against the union, forced the actions of the union into the public domain, where previously the actions had gone unnoticed. So any protest shows a dialogue between two opposing views, allowing each point of view to be heard. So the debate which was highlighted by the unions attempting to create a standard contract for contract workers. So that debate over non-standardised workers is still being discussed today, and it is something that is a global issue. And we see that with the abolition of the 0 hours contract, which happened in March this year. So all three theorists have a unique perspective on protest in the modern world, and together I think they perform a really comprehensive understanding of the modern nature of protest. I believe that protest today can still perform meaningful change, but we have to be more critical and more aware of what we are protesting for and what exactly we want to achieve. Thank you.